Later this year, we are expecting the European Commission to present a revised EU forest strategy. This will be an important policy tool for forest owners and for the forest-based industries. And for obvious reasons, the starting point concerning the state of European forests will be strongly influencing the strategy and any policy instruments suggested. So in other words, it is all connected, and that is what we intend to explore here today. If you want to pose a question during the event, you can do so by logging on to menti.com using the code that you see in front of you, 13283444. So please, once again, log on to Menti once more using this code. You can pose a question writing your name, affiliation, the question and whom you address it to, and please respect the KISS principle, meaning keep it short and simple. And we'll do our very best to accommodate as many of these questions as we can during the event. If you are active on social media, please include the hashtag #GreenSource. And last but not least, I just want to inform you that this event is recorded and it will be available afterwards for you or anyone else to view. It is now my pleasure to introduce you to Mr. Juri Ringman. Juri is Director General of Cepi, the European Association for Paper Industries, and you're here today to tell us about facts we didn't know about European forests and why things are actually better than we might think.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, that's a big pleasure because we don't hear about the good news, and today we thought we could share some of the good news that people would need to know.
Excellent. The floor is yours.
Thank you.
We have all seen the news. Deforestation, biodiversity loss, and damage to forests are severe global issues with massive economic, ecologic, and societal implications. However, when looking at the state of forest in Europe, a different story emerges. Forests in Europe are monitored both on national and regional scale, and improvements have taken place measured on nearly all indicators that have been systematically followed during the past 30 years. But often, when things are getting better, we don't hear about them. We at Cepi relate to the future development with great ambition. Much more remains to be done. But it is also important to know the great development that is already taking place. Things are better than you may have thought. Let's have a closer look. Forests cover over 1/3 of Europe's land area. The forest area and volume have increased in all regions of Europe. The total growing stock has increased by 10 billion cubic meters, or by 50%, while the forest area has increased by 19 million hectares since 1990. This is equal to 1,500 football pitches of new forest every day. Simultaneously, we have been able to increase harvesting by 32% during the same period. Moreover, the forest grows in particular where the forest-based industry is strong. This is solid proof of sustainable forest management in action, a concept introduced, applied, and continuously improved in forestry already for over 300 years. 3/4 of the annual growth is used, while 1/4 or 160 million cubic meters of the growth is saved to the growing stock each year. The yearly European forest growth is as big as the entire forest resources of the United Kingdom. This means that we will have recovered from Brexit by the end of the year, at least as far as the forest resources are concerned. The forest turns into a net sink of carbon when the amount of carbon emitted in final fellings is less than the carbon sequestered. Meanwhile, Carbon is also stored in bio-based products such as wooden buildings and furniture. Hence, active forest management plays an important role in maximizing the sequestration impact of forest, while simultaneously creating renewable raw materials, jobs, and welfare, making the economy move towards carbon neutrality. The amount of carbon stored in the biomass of European forest has grown by 50% over the last 30 years, thanks to long-term investments in forest resources, which has led to growth in the volume of wood. Currently, EU's forests sequester some 10% of EU's greenhouse gas emissions. When accounting for prevented fossil emissions by substituting fossil resources, the share is up to double that, 20% of all greenhouse gas emissions of the continent. While other sectors in the society are carbon sources, forest is a carbon sink, and that sink has grown by 5% in the past 3 decades. However, even if we can strengthen the sink with active forest management, the sequestration capacity is limited. Carbon neutrality would not be reached even if all of Europe would be entirely covered with forest. While sustainable forest management strengthens the sinks in the long run, emission reduction in other sectors is imperative. We must keep fossils in the ground. Biodiversity is important for forest resilience and well-being. Biodiversity in forest is safeguarded both through active forest management and protection of habitats. The area of forest designated for nature conservation has increased by 65% in 20 years, meaning that about 1/4 of European forests are protected. The systems in place to monitor forest resources are increasingly sophisticated. Biodiversity is increasingly used as a tool by corporations in their environmental impact assessments. The occurrence of birds is commonly viewed as a good indicator of biodiversity. While the occurrence of birds in agricultural lands has shrunk, have the populations of forest birds remained stable. In Europe, about 1 cubic meter of wood is consumed per capita every year. Traditionally, only under half of the forest biomass has been utilized in value-added products, while a large share has been used for green energy production. Sustainable bioenergy does play a role in decarbonization while moving towards the circular bioeconomy. The innovative European industry keeps on developing new end uses and products of industrial side streams, and inside the business ecosystems, markets do work very well. When a level playing field for all end uses is ensured, those streams will be developed towards high-value, essential products benefiting our daily life and fitting well-functioning recycling infrastructures already in place. In many cases, these products replace fossil-based materials, having an immediate and significant climate mitigation benefit. The forest industry provides employment to millions across Europe and plays a central role in many countries' economies. 1 in 5 manufacturing companies in Europe is in the forest-based industries. During the past 30 years, a massive leap has been taken forward in the deployment of new technologies and digitalization. This in turn has enabled the competitiveness of the European industry through increased efficiency and higher value-added products through innovation. Forests are an important part in our daily life. They provide well-being to both rural and urban communities, prevent soil erosion, preserve water and air resources, and provide other ecosystem services. 70% of forest and wooded land are available for public recreation, and a European citizen visits forest on average some 16 times a year. Millions of Europeans are forest owners. Both the profile of the owners and the size and nature of forest varies largely, creating challenges for EU-wide forest policies to add value to already existing voluntary schemes and national regulation. Roughly 60% of the EU's forests are owned by private individuals, their cooperatives, and companies, who have a large opportunity and responsibility to determine the direction of development for forest in the future. It is crucial to ensure the profitability of forestry so that necessary investments in forest management, including biodiversity, can be carried out also in the future. Sustainable forest management is the basis for success in using nature-based solutions in our European economy, and in turn, the economy will continue to support sustainable forest management.
Thank you for that presentation, Yuri. Many stakeholders are very involved in the debate on European forests, and there are a lot of opinions about what should or should not happen with the forests. My personal experience is that the forest owner often end up in the firing line in these debates. I also experience that there is a lot of discussions about forest owners, but perhaps not so often discussions with them. And we intend to change that here today, and it is my pleasure to now introduce you to 3 forest owners/managers. So I say a big welcome to Luc Bouvarel from France, Christian Tönnisson from Estonia, and Nils Ringborg from Sweden. And gentlemen, this is the time for you to turn your cameras and your microphones on. Excellent. Technology seems to be working for us. Can you all 3 hear me? Excellent. Make sure that you have turned your microphones on as well. We can see that you have not done so, Luke, and not Nils either. So please adjust that to begin with. Now it seems to be better. Good. Our first topic here today is that I'm going to let you tell our participants a bit about the forest that you own or manage. So I think everyone is interested to know how large a forest holding is this, where is it geographically located, and how come you own or manage this forest? And the first one, the one to go first on this one is you, Nils. So you get the honor of telling us about the forest that you own and manage. And Nils, your microphone is off. Turn it on, please.
Now it's on.
Excellent.
Good morning, everyone. Thank you for inviting me here. My name is Nils Ringborg. I'm representing Holmen, and Holmen is a public company in Sweden who is a big forest owner. And I have also own experience of forest management by owning around 1,000 hectares of land in southern part of Sweden. I don't think there is any big difference between managing public forest, company forest, or in private. It's the same guidelines that is there. Holmen owns 1.2 million hectares of forest land, whereof 1 million hectares is actively managed, and that is a very big area. It's around the same size, the double size of Denmark's total area of forest land, so it's big. And we are one of 300,000 owners of forest land in Sweden. Holmen's forest land is situated all over Sweden, but most is concentrated in northern part of Sweden. And as you know, Sweden is a very long country. So if you put it from Copenhagen, it will go down to Italy. So it's over many kind of climate zones, you could say, and you have to adapt it regionally and locally where the forest land is.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
I think we now turn the word over to Christian. So tell us a bit about the forest holdings that you manage in Estonia.
Yes, hello, and thank you for having me. It's my pleasure to tell you some facts about Estonia and state forests in Estonia. For those who don't know where Estonia is, everybody knows Finland, because that is where Santa Claus comes from. And Estonia is located just south of Finland on the shore of Gulf of Finland. So Estonia is covered by forest. Half of Estonia's land territory is covered by forest, and our organization, State Forest Management Center, is managing half of Estonia's forests, precisely 47%. It's quite diverse forest, not geographically in the sense that was mentioned by Nils. It's not stretched over vast geographical area, but it's nevertheless, it has a lot of micro variations. We have high share of wetlands. We have high share of more fertile soils. So the forest is very diverse, and this, of course, poses management challenges to us as well. So, and our organization, what do? We do manage state forests. We do take care of nature conservation in protected areas, and we do offer recreation opportunities for people in public forests and protected areas.
Well, thank you. Over to you, Luke. Tell us a bit about the forest holding that you own.
Well, I'm quite a big difference with the two other people, because I'm forest owner of 12 hectares in 4 pieces in the same municipality. It's fragmented in 4 plots, at least of 2 hectares. And the forest is located in the Rhone Valley, south of Lyon, the big town there. And the climate is continental with Mediterranean influence. And it was in my family for 5 generations.
Interesting, thank you. Well, gentlemen, just by telling us a bit about the forest that you care so much about, we have seen the diversity among forest owners that in Europe that Yuri spoke about earlier. We have the very large holdings, for instance, the example of Holmen. We have large state holdings, like in the example of Estonia, and we have the small private forest owner exemplified here by Luke. So thank you very much. You listened to Yuri before in his presentation, so I'm interested to hear, did you recognize yourself in the presentation he gave? Did you recognize the development in your forest? So tell us a bit about that. And this time, Christian, you can go first.
Thank you, Anna. Yes, indeed. The situation in Estonia is quite similar. We do have scary pictures about the forest, being lost or ending. And we have numbers that tell us somewhat different story. Just to draw some parallels, since 1942, Estonia's forest area has increased 1.6 times. That is about 900,000 hectares. And if we look at the different aspects, yes, it's absolutely, we see similarities there. If we talk about forest birds in Estonia, the forest bird index is stable, has been stable for past 12 years. Whereas farmland birds, their index is slightly, uncertain. So we don't see a clear trend. Perhaps farmland birds are doing even better in Estonia than they're doing in Europe. We clearly see the need to manage commercial forests, because forests are a very important part of Estonia's economy, just as they are an important part of Estonia's biodiversity. And managed forests represent in our state forest 60%. So the rest is either already strictly protected or have quite strong management limitations.
Well, thank you. And Luke, did you recognize yourself and your forest in the presentation that Yuri gave?
Well, yes, a bit, because in France, it's like in Estonia. The forest has increased on the last century of about 5 million hectares. And a lot of small owners actually are managing more and more their forest. And we take care on the biodiversity aspect through our management plant we have actually in France. And this, the number of owners with such management increase each year actually. But we have a lot of problem with the people, because they don't understand how we cut trees. They want wood in their houses, but they don't want the tree cutting in their forest near their houses. That's a big problem actually in France.
I see the problem there, yes, indeed. And Nils, you're last on this one. Did you recognize yourself in Yuri's presentation, or was there anything that you felt, no, that does not apply to the forests owned by Holmen?
No, I think it was an excellent presentation. In the background, you can see a wetland that I have created on my own private forest. And I would like to say that's a guidance for biodiversity that Yuri was speaking about. And both Christian and Bovarel was also in that matter. That is the big change. And the number of protected land in Sweden has also increased by a lot, and it's around between 25 and 30% according to the Swedish forest industries, and that is also a big change. Also, these indicators that Yuri was talking about is very, very, very good signals, and that is important for the future, that we are taking care of biodiversity.
Well, thank you. I think the audience is very interested to hear a little bit more about how you manage your forests, what measures you do, and in general, but more specifically, how do you manage to balance the three pillars of sustainable forest management, the economic, the environmental, and the social pillars? How do you manage this on a daily basis? Because you are the ones living in and from the forests, so you are the ones who really have the hands-on experience. And this time we'll go to you first, Luke. Tell us a bit about your...
Yes, actually, I manage my forest, as I said to you, with a forest management plan. And when I do this management, I take about 6 months to look at all the parcels, the plots I have, analyze them, look at not only the soil, but also the water disponibility, and then look of all the natural plants we have in there. And then I adapted the management has done in this plot in function of all these results. For example, with the climate change, I have a plot where the reserves, the water reserve, have evaluated in the last years. And I managed to move and change the species I have in this plot in function of this operation. So I have at the beginning a poplar plantation in this area, and now I am a diversity mixture of broadleaves because it's more resilient in this area. So I try to manage the trees with the soil and the climate in this area, taking account not only the soil but also the biodiversity, because I need biodiversity to have resilient forests actually.
So it sounds to me as your measures are very, very locally grounded. It has to be...
Yes, it is. It is at the plot level. It is at the plot level.
Interesting. Niels, you're next here. Tell us a bit. You represent the big company who owns millions of hectares. So how do you plan and carry out your management measures?
I think we do the same as Luc Bovarel. We have these small plots, these small areas in the forest management plans that is carefully taken care of, and we make a plan each year. And a very important thing is for these big holdings that we have is skilled people, knowledge that is carried out by very educated persons who's following the latest news about how we should take care of both the economic, social, and biological. Of course, there's a big discussion of the biological things now, but we do have the right people doing this in a very careful way, and we also, I would like to say, in general, have a very good cooperation with the authorities and the Swedish Forest Act that is a main pillar for all these three things that is going around.
Well, thank you. Christian, you're last on this one. The way you plan and carry out your measures, are they similar to what you've heard from Luke and Niels, or are you doing things differently?
Well, they are similar because forest management is somewhat universal, despite the fact that forests itself are very different. So a state organization, I must say that forest law is our Bible. And our view is a long-term view that Estonia's future generations should have the same opportunity to benefit from multiple roles and functions of forests as we do today. And it seems that one of the main challenges that we are facing today is actually related to history. The 80 years of continuous growth of forest cover have made people somewhat used to forests expanding. But now, especially when commercial forests are mature, they need to be regenerated. And the thing that causes perhaps most distress to people is the visual change in forest landscape. This is despite the fact that state forests are all open for public access, well, with the exception perhaps of nature reserves. They're open 24/7, and there is a wide network of forest roads, again, which are free for people to use for recreation. We carry out regeneration felling in state forest in about 1.1% of the total area. We use native species only for forest regeneration. It's biodiversity aspects, ever important also in the managed forests. We maintain key elements of those, just like in Sweden, I am sure, retention trees, deadwood, woodland key habitats. So they're sort of all there. And then besides that, we also offer 6,300 jobs in the state forest management operation every year. So there comes the social aspect. So it is a very diverse, multiple-faceted picture we're facing in the forests, but we are feeling good about it.
Well, this is really interesting, even for me as a moderator, to listen to, because despite the differences in holdings that you have, from the millions to the 11 hectares, there are so many similarities in how you plan and carry out your measures. And you all perceive this feeling of being so very, very close to your forest. Our last topic here today is that we're going to focus a bit more specifically on the development of forest biodiversity in your forests. So I think many of the participants are really interesting. Can you be a little bit more specific? What do you do to maintain and enhance the biodiversity in your forests? And do you have examples of positive or negative trends that you could share with us? And this time, Nils, you are first.
Thank you very much. First of all, a forest is very emotional, and it's not only for the people who uses the forest as recreation from the towns. It's also for the forest owners, as myself representing private, but also the company. It's a very, for example, the monoculture that is we're talking about many times. It's not that. It's a very, very forest of variations where you can see these kind of indicators that we always do in the management plans, trying to increase the broadleaf trees, number of them, the share of that has increased. Dead wood. We are also making forest fires to take care about the insects. And in general, we have rules that in also these clear-cut areas that we have, also saving old trees for eternity to stand there, and all this kind of more specific adapted rules for every of those plots that Luke was talking about. So it's not a general thing that we do. We adapt all kind of measures to the local conditions that we have.
Okay, good. Thank you. So, Christian, does it differ in Estonia, or are there similarities to what Nils mentioned?
Well, I think I will just mention few numbers here and few aspects. As a government organization, again, we are entrusted with the management of public lands, just as we are entrusted with taking care of conservation management works in public lands. So we have to understand that there are certain limits to how voluntary we can be. In the protected areas, it's quite strictly regulated what we can and what we must do. But that being said, however, we have noticed certain problems in forests that are related to biodiversity, and just an example of flying squirrel, which is a very nice, cute animal located in Estonia in the edge of its natural area. So we noticed that the protection regime established by the regulations actually is not sufficient to make sure that flying squirrels can get in touch with each other from their different locations. So what we did nearly 10 years ago, we voluntarily designated corridors between these habitats so that squirrels can actually meet and have babies. So and that works. So inside this corridor, we designated specific forest areas where they can inhabit new areas. And our monitoring shows that quite many of those plots actually have been inhabited. So there is flying squirrel in new places where it has not been before. And just mentioning that it was on the brink of extinction in Estonia, 10 years ago, we can today say that, but there is hope. And by establishing those corridors, we did not stop management because corridors can be mobile. So this is where the smart thing comes through. We don't need strict regulations everywhere. We need appropriate measures that actually deliver on biodiversity. And these examples are numerous, so I'm afraid I can't take more of your time, but I would love to.
but I think we will all remember the the corridors for the flying squirrels. I mean, that was an excellent example that I think will stay with most of us. So Luke, you get the honor here of having the final word in this discussion in total. So do you have an example of a nice development concerning biodiversity in your forest?
Yes, I have a small forest, 12 hectares, I say to you, but I manage it with a management plan. But this management plan is not written in the stone. It's evaluated in function of what is appeared in the plot. And I use actually a tool. We call it the Potential Index of Biodiversity. It's been a tool made in France. It's a tool. It don't measure the importance of the biodiversity, but it gives the effect of the operation of the forest owner on the habitat of the biodiversity. And for example, I manage actually my plot, leaving a dry tree in the plot, as this tree is not have effect on the other objective trees. Before 10 or 20 years ago, I cut these trees because it's not very nice in the way around. Actually, I got it. So it's very important. And as my management is, economically speaking, is barely balanced according to the price of the wood I have, the other intrinsic motivation I have to manage my forests is to train my children and my grandchildren in my intervention by explaining, by learning them how to manage the forest. Because actually I am not trying to improve the nature, but to help them to be good and wealthy.
Well, thank you. And to all three of you, Nils, Christian and Luke, a very big thank you for contributing here today. I'm going to turn to Yuri to see if there's any question from the audience.
Two questions.
Two. Make them short.
One technical question. Will the slides be available after this?
Well, I think you can answer that.
I can actually, yes, and they will be. So the recording of this podcast or Cepinar will be available as a whole, but also we make the slides available. Then there's a question to all of the panelists, which I hope you can answer in a short but remarkable way. It's the idea that the forest system is changing very slowly. So what would be your answer to those people who are very impatient to see the good progress in forests? So if you do something today, you will see the results maybe decades later. How you can make these people wait patiently? What would be your answer?
So who wants to go first on that one? I think we'll throw it to Christian. What is the relevant time period for you in your work in the forest? Can you do things now that gives a big reward 8 to 10 years from now?
Well, yes, thank you. It's a very interesting question, and I think we need to split it into different parts. So in forests, every decision we make has a very long time implications. And forester, when it plants a new forest, he does not harvest the same forest. It's for the children or grandchildren to do. So one aspect that we want to ensure in the forest is protecting natural processes. And that is what we do in nature reserves, so the nature can actually respond to climate challenges on its own way. But the decision that we make in commercial forests, we must have sufficient knowledge to make those long-term decisions. And that is why we have actually funded over the past 10 years scientific research projects, just to gain more information, more knowledge about the smart choices in the forestry, and that's what I would recommend everybody in forest sector to do. Thank you.
Anything to add from your side, Nils, about quick fixes?
Yeah, I think that's my background is a quick fix. It's about the wetlands that will change biodiversity very quickly, and as you can see, this is done for 4 years and it's fantastic, and that's the quick fix.
And Luke, any quick
Yes.
things from your side?
One more thing. As I said to you, I have Mediterranean influence. We have actually a lot of change, natural change from the climate change. And we have to manage the forest if we don't want them to die. And it's very impressive. We have some area where the trees are totally died, not only about insects, but also because they're about the water. And if the forest owner don't do something, I think we are going to lose surfaces of forests in this area.
Well, once again, thank you, gentlemen, to all three of you. I think it's been very much appreciated that you participated here today. So thank you, and bye. I do hope that you stay and watch the rest of the Cepi. And we're going to do that in relation to the upcoming revision of the EU forest strategy. But before that, let's have a look at this slide. Since 1990, the number of EU policies directly or indirectly affecting forests, well, they have grown manifold. And you see examples of such policies here in several different important areas such as environment, energy, climate and finance. And this creates, without any doubt, a multi-level regulatory network in which it is becoming very complicated to navigate for forest owners and member states alike. And it is now my pleasure to introduce you to the following three panelists. We do the ladies first. We're going to talk to Jessica Poolfjord. She is a member of European Parliament since 2019. And in the Parliament, she is, among other things, a member of the Environment Committee. We're going to talk to Marta Soto Barreiros. She is Environment and Forestry Expert at CELPA, which is the Portuguese Paper Industry Association. And we are also going to talk to Dan Burger Kutselici. I'm sorry about that pronunciation, but I'm doing my best here. He is Undersecretary at the Ministry of Agriculture, Forestry and Food in Slovenia. And concerning Slovenia, I can remind all of you that they take on the presidency of the European Union from the 1st of July. So now we hope that technology is working and that we will, within very shortly, will be able to see our three panelists. We are at the moment, Miss Marta is there. Can you turn your camera on, please, Marta?
I think I have my camera turned on. Do you see me? Not yet?
Not yet. We can hear you, but we cannot yet see you.
Okay, let me check first, because let me see what are happening here. Sorry.
So, Marta, while you do that, I can tell the audience that as organizers, we have, of course, also done our very best to have a representative of the European Commission on this panel. After all, we are to discuss a policy instrument that the Commission soon is to publish. And we have made several requests, but we have not been successful in acquiring panelists. It seems that the Commission is very busy at the moment, working on several important files. We understand that they have a heavy workload, and we wish them the very best managing that workload. And yes, technology is soon with us. Voila, very good indeed. If I then may ask Mike Turner and Dennis Popov to turn your cameras on. You are not speakers in this session, so if you could please turn your cameras on. We would be able to see our panelists a bit better. Good. So I can see, Dan, that your microphone is off, and Jessica, your microphone is off as well. Let's get going. So our first topic here today is, what should the role and the status be of the revised EU forest strategy? And I'll start off by making a claim. I claim that the strategy needs to be holistic. It needs to act as a coherence instrument, and it needs to have a standalone status versus other policy instruments. So holistic, coherence, and standalone. So let's start with you, Jessica. Do you agree with my claim? And what did the Parliament say on this when you were very engaged in the Parliament's position that you agreed last fall?
Thank you, Anna, and thank you for inviting me to a seminar that is positive. It's very nice to be invited to such an arrangement. I've been listening with great interest here to the previous speakers, and yes, I agree with your claim. And it was very important for me that the strategy should be a standalone strategy. It's easy to have all possible issues in the same strategy because it is important, but I do think it's very important that this should be clean and being a standalone strategy. And I also think that we have a unique opportunity to take a full view of the roles that the forest can play. And we know that it plays in the society as social, economic, environmental roles. And we have been, like you showed in the beginning, a lot of policies that affect the forest sector. And I think that we need to give the strategy a very central role above all the coherence instrument. And maybe this might sound a bit straightforward, but I actually think it could be a bit tricky. From my perspective, I think this is something that my group, EPP, often pushes for, that it is important to make sure that our roles are as straightforward as possible. And I think that one of the roles is that we will have a coherent policy framework. Unfortunately, I think that we very often in the parliament attempts to be effectively change strategies and laws by other means. And just give me, I will just give a short example. We voted on the last session for a resolution on soil protection, but we could see in that there were references to the forest strategy and attempt to even add restrictions on that strategy. And I don't think that it is acceptable. And from my point of view, I think that this strategy has to be actually a standalone strategy and actually allow to set the tone for the policy on forest and forestry in the future.
Well, thank you, Jessica. We'll go to Dan next. From your Slovenian perspective, what do you expect for this strategy in relation to holistic coherence and standalone?
Yes, good morning, everyone, and thank you first also to inviting me to this event. From our side, it's clear that the forests have a big role to play in fighting against climate change and also decreasing biological diversity, and that the forests, due to their ecological, social, economic functions, occupy an important role in the transition to the climate neutral and circular economy, and will also have an important role in recovery after the pandemic. And to use this potential, there is also a need to ensure a balance among all different functions that the forests have, and this has to be directed towards sustainable, multifunctional and close to nature forest management, which will promote efficient forest resources and while recognizing also national characteristic limitations and capabilities. So for us, the forest strategy should actually create and enable this kind of holistic framework that will allow the forest to contribute to ambitious goals in their areas of climate, biodiversity, rural development, energy, and will also address this ever-increasing fragmentation of the sectorial approaches to forest. You showed a number of legal documents and strategies which all see forests differently and all look towards the forest to achieve their sectorial goals, which can in certain cases be contradictory and even impact the national forest practices. So we hope that the forest strategy would actually address this, that on the EU level there will be a common approach how the forests are addressed.
Well, thank you. And over to you, Marta. You represent more forest ownership and forest industries. So what's your perspective concerning holistic coherence and standalone?
Well, good morning. First of all, I would like to thank Cepi for this invitation. It is a great honor to participate in this initiative when it seems that the important contribution of the planted forest to carbon neutrality is forgotten. So I will answer briefly to your question because the time is short. So I'm representing the Portuguese Pulp and Paper Industry Association, And for SELPA and for SELPA member companies, the new forest strategy should be think and design taking into account the nature and the ownership of the forests. So, because all the stakeholders, forest owners, the forest managers, the bio-based forest industries, all the value chain of the forestry play a key role, and they are the drivers to achieve the goals of this revised strategy. So furthermore, the new forest strategy should assure the principles of subsidiarity. So it aims to ensure that the decision making is as close as possible to the ones that are involved. And as I said before, all the forest value chain, but also taking into account the realities of each member state, namely the nature of the property, its ownership, because if it's private or public, and for example, the public-owned forest represents on average 40% of the area in the EU. But average always hides a lot of differences. And for instance, in Portugal, only 3% of the forest is public, and therefore 97% of the forest is private and small-scale private owners. So the strategy will have to take into account these differences and these different realities, different species, different forests all over Europe. So Europe is diversity. For that, there's no one size fits all. Also, the strategy, in order to be effective, should include a set of financial instruments, so financial support, investments, so that could be applied to each national reality. And I think that's the key and the highlights of your question. So back to you, Anna.
Well, thank you very much. I especially like the fact that you mentioned the one-size-fits-all solution, that there actually probably, or most likely, none such solution exists for European forests. So let's move to the next topic, which is about how should the strategy address the multifunctionality of forests? And some of you have already touched a little bit on it, but this time I claim that sustainable forest management needs to be central in the strategy. And by that, I mean that the strategy needs to acknowledge that forest management is about balancing the three pillars: economic, ecological, and social. And as we heard from the forest owners before, this is something they do on a daily basis, almost not even without thinking about it sometimes. So this time we'll start with you, Dan. So on behalf of Slovenia, do you agree that the strategy has to acknowledge that we need to work with all three pillars, have that balance, or could you theoretically be fine with a strategy which has an emphasis on one of the pillars, for instance, the ecological one?
Yeah, thank you. I think for us, multifunctionality is an essential concept for which we believe that it should be next to sustainable forest management included as a key principle in the new forest strategy. For us, this is especially important because of we are quite a small country with still a lot of forest, and we want to have the multifunctionality principle, which clarifies that it's on one single area of forest, several management objectives can be defined at the same time. So we look into again, as also Marta mentioned, to the needs characteristic in that area. And this kind of multifunctional management takes into account the climate, biodiversity, energy, social, and also other objectives such as rural development. So how we do this in Slovenia, for example, it's very easy, again, to talk about multifunctionality, but it's more difficult to implement many times on the ground. And in Slovenia, we develop forest management plans for all forest owners, regardless if they're public or private, and this is financed from the state. And in the preparation of the management plans, we invite all different stakeholders, from the owners to the NGOs to the Institute for Nature Conservation. And we define with them the management objectives to find spatial and time balance between different forest functions. And this is not an easy task, but it's very important to approach when reconciling potential contradictory objectives. So it's a long process, which takes, but it recognizes actually that there's a difference, and it also builds a better understanding of what is sustainable forest management and how things are done on the ground. So we really think that this is an important concept that has to be included in the strategy.
Well, thank you. And Marta, from your Portuguese perspective, is it a must that the strategy acknowledges all 3 pillars, or could you, from your perspective, could you work with a strategy which perhaps is tilted towards one of the pillars?
It is a must that the strategy work with the 3 pillars. And multifunctional forests and sustainable forest management are linked. So the European Forest Strategy must ensure and recognize that the productive forests that are well managed in a sustainable way provide goods and services while protecting and conserving. So it must be assumed that ecosystem services like clean air, water, biodiversity, and the supply of raw materials are inherent of all forests, including production, so the planted forests. And not just conservation and protection. So the driver also has to be the profitability of the forest to ensure the remaining functions are ensured. And we have to think that the forest is an economic activity and it has to have an income and to be well managed. And in particular, when we are talking about the private forests. One of the essential ways to ensure the function of the forest is through innovation and the use of new technologies. With the new tools to act and to better manage our territory, we manage our forest also more efficiently. And a very good example of that is the development and improvement of the forest information system in Portugal by SELPA member companies who actively and sustainably manage more than 200,000 hectares of planted forests, most eucalyptus and pine forests, but also many other species. So through this innovative monitoring project using Sentinel-2, allow us the monitor of 3 of health status to identify land use and land use changes all over country and to monitor forest dynamics and understand a bit more of how trees are growing, the new forest, the harvested. So it's the result is that the forest management are able to step in days in advance and focus where the forest needs the most care. So combined with these new tools, we also have a straight collaboration with the researchers, with universities, and a forest inventory in the field. So we have these new tools, new technology, but still we have to go to the field and manage and do this combined forest inventory. So the better we know our forest, the better we will manage.
Thank you. And Jessica, from your political perspective, do you expect the Commission to present a strategy which fully acknowledges the multifunctionality, or where do you think this might land from a political perspective?
Yeah, thank you. I think this discussion that we're having right now is fundamental, and of course it is an important, like you said, and I expect the Commission to take note that the strategy have to respect the multifunctionality of forests. And we fought hard to include that in the strategy, and the notion from the Parliament it is in the Parliament's position. So I think I hope that it will be included, or I expect the Commission to include this in the strategy. And I think it is what you said in the beginning. It is very important that we have all 3 pillars included, and they have to hold hands, and it's a must to respect all of them, of course, because we can see what in so many ways that it is contributing to society, and that we have to also see all the positive effects of managing forests, and what we can do, and what we can have in a sustainable way from the forest. And I think that sometimes it is just considered as a carbon sink, and I think that is not the only resource that we can have from the forest.
Thank you. We'll move on to our next topic. The Commission has announced that they intend to launch an initiative called 3 billion additional trees up until 2030. And here I claim that this initiative could be an excellent policy tool if forest owners are allowed to contribute in a bottom-up process. And it's also worth remembering that planting a tree is not enough. A tree needs to be managed and managed well, Otherwise, the anticipated benefits will not materialize. So, Marta, you're first on this one because you are involved in Cepi's initiative to define its contribution to the 3 billion additional tree initiative. So could you please tell us a bit, how do you discuss within the Cepi family in relation to this initiative?
Well, this initiative is indeed an emblematic initiative to draw attention to the forest, but we have to take into account the 3 pillars of sustainability and also the forest sector, economical, social and environmental, and not distort the objective of the forest sector. So the tree planting action should be done while taking care of the principle of sustainable forest management and demonstrating that the economical and social dimensions of forestry can and must be equally taken into account as the objective in terms of carbon sequestration and biodiversity protection. So after planting, someone has to manage the plantations, and forest owners should be involved in this initiative from its beginning. So in addition to the tree planting initiative, should not be a way to solve the environmental problems of other sectors. That's the point. So, for example, offsetting emission of sectors outside forest-based value chain. Furthermore, more science-based input could be provided as it comes to the current tree planting activities to better map the real impact of this initiative, and in particular regarding the need to adapt to climate change with climate-smart forest management. And back to you, Anna.
Thank you. And Jessica, do you just remind us, when you were engaged in defining the position on the forest strategy in the Parliament, were you specific with your opinions about this 3 additional billion tree initiative, or what did you say?
I think that this is maybe not the main topic in the strategy, and I agree a lot with what Marta just said, that this can contribute in a positive way, and maybe it will be of public interest, and maybe we can appreciate the trees and the forests and the forest sector more. But I think it's not this that will make the big change. And I also agree with Marta that we cannot do it if we don't managing the trees and the forests in the future. And of course, this has to be something that we also engage all the forest owners in if it will be successful. So I think it has to be more than just a goal and a number that we see in the future if it will make any change.
Thank you. And Dan, on this one, how do you see this initiative from Slovenia?
Yeah, thank you, Anna, for the question. Slovenia is a highly forested country where through the last century and a bit more, we have seen a considerable increase in the forest cover due to agricultural land abandonment and also afforestation. And now it covers over 60% of total area. So as such, we see limited or no possibilities for further afforestation and expansion of the forest, because this can cause conflicts with the other objectives that we also need, such as food security and also energy in certain cases. So instead, we are more focusing on the existing forests and focusing on managing them sustainably, so they can continue to provide all 3 pillars that we were mentioning already earlier, and to ensure also that the forests are adapted to the climate change and enhance resilience, that we preserve the high growing stock, the constant tree cover, and also different management approaches. So we are really looking into that. So regardless of that, we do see some potential in promoting, for example, some forests in the meadows, like like in agroforestry. And this will still require that we manage these areas. And we do expect that the Commission will further clarify exactly this initiative and how the targets will be achieved on the financial resources, which if they will be available, and how these trees will actually be counted, and which trees are actually counted, only new trees or also areas as restoration of areas or urban trees or trees in the orchards. But on the long term, I think we have to ensure that we will manage those trees to help them first with the different management operations such as standing to ensure their long-term survival. Thank you.
Thank you. And that takes us to the last of my questions to you today, and that is, what role should the strategy have in relation to forest biodiversity? And this time I claim that the strategy needs to acknowledge that it is the forest owner who best knows what measures to use to maintain and enhance biodiversity in his or her forest. And I also argue that production of timber and protection for biodiversity purposes, they can be achieved simultaneously, and they do not need to be in contradiction to each other. So let's see what you have to say on this one. And this time you're first, Jessica. Do you agree that we can combine production and protection?
I truly do, and I think that it is very important just to see that this is one another's friend and not the opposite. And I can see that in the Parliament that we are discussing a new strategy for biodiversity, and of course the forests are included and in that strategy as well. But I do think that it's important to tell the story that was told by the previous speakers, the forest owners, what we can do and what is being done for the biodiversity. And I think that what Luke said, that he has had his forest for 5 generations, I do think that that is important knowledge to be to pay attention to, and I think they have developed this over generations and practices, and also the wetland that was given as an example for being a private forest owner and to take responsibility for the biodiversity. And I think that is how we can reach also biodiversity in that sense. And the forests are important, and the forest owners are more important in this. And I would just give a final remark, and I think that is important for the coming discussion, and maybe also to contribute to the set of this discussion. And I think there is today a degree of confusion when we speak about the forest in the Parliament. And I would say that some voices often confuse European forestry with destructive practices in other countries, such as, for example, Brazil. And I think that this creates a rhetoric that is not describing the European forests. And I think that this also risks to lead to unclear policies. And I think that, therefore, I would just say again that I think it's very important that we have that you arranging this kind of seminar, for example, just to give information and give the right information for what people need to hear, and also policymakers.
Thank you. And then I'll ask both Dan and Marta to comment, but could you please do that a little bit shortly, because then we're going to bring in some questions from the audience. So Dan, you're first. Do you manage to combine production and protection in Slovenia, and how do you do it?
Yeah, thank you. So when it comes to the management of biodiversity, I would again refer to the forest management plans that we are developing. And in Slovenia, these plans are also management plans for Natura 2000 areas. So basically, when we create these plans, we look into all the objectives, economic, environmental, and social dimensions. And then we set the spatial and time limitations, how the things have to be managed. And in case of forest owners are limited with their economic functions, there are compensations available. And for example, since recently, we are also supporting forest owners to enhance their biodiversity actions through measures such as eco-cells, which represent a single tree or forest stand, which is then left for natural development for 20 years. For which owners can also be incentivized. So for us, we see that there are existing practices on the national levels and many good examples. And through the monitoring, for example, of the amount of dead wood, which is set in the legislation, how much it has to be left in the forest, we see that we are meeting those targets. So the policies are working. So there are good examples, and we think that the EU forest strategy should work on enhancing collaboration and cross-border work, knowledge sharing on this kind of innovative instruments, but also recognize the different situation between member states and the knowledge that we have in bringing this kind of objectives forward.
Well, thank you. And Marta, you get the honor now to round this whole forest strategy debate, to round it off. So from the Portuguese perspective, how do you manage production versus protection?
Well, shortly. Well, for the CEPA member companies, the best way to protect biodiversity and the resilience of European forest ecosystem is through an active and sustainable forest management, taking into account the regional specificities and the difference of member states. So the forest must remain productive in long term in order to maintain its ecological functions. So forest can provide environmental services together with the commercial wood production. And we have in mind that the aim of the forest strategy is to ensure a productive, healthy and resilient forests. So this is, for example, necessary to halt biodiversity loss and to mitigate climate change. So such healthy forests also help to reduce and control natural disasters and offers opportunities for local development to secure livelihoods. So the forest owners are the ones who best knows and all the forest stakeholders. So they are the ones who better care for the forests. So for CEPA member companies that also support the small forest owners, they defend the need to build a new European forest strategy that is stronger, that it acts as a bridge between the national forest policies of the different member states, of course, and the EU objectives in the forest domain, which is centered on international agreements on sustainable forest management and the respective balance between the function of production, protection, and conservation.
Well, thank you. And now I'm going to ask Yuri, do we have any questions to this panel?
We have two questions, yes.
Shoot.
The first one is to Dan Burgar. So you mentioned the close to nature forestry. And after your statement, there was a question that how would you want to follow that up in the forest strategy?
Yes, thank you. So for us, the close to nature forestry is an approach where we try to mimic the developments that we see in the natural forest, like in the natural reserves, and we try to move this into the active managed forest. So this is one of the approaches that is possible to be done in the countries. So I think it can be mentioned, but this doesn't mean that there's no other approaches that are also viable. So again, as I said, the strategy should recognize the variety between the countries and the different approaches there exist, because these are long-term processes that were developed through history. So in Slovenia, already for the first forest management plans were developed more than 250 years ago. And building on this knowledge, we are always advancing. So with the new information, we are trying to improve the forest management. Yeah, thank you.
Thank you, Dan Burgar. Then I had a second question. It was not addressed to anybody particularly, but I think only Jessica would be able to help us with that question. We have heard these diverse and very ambitious expectations that everybody has for the forest strategy. But then we know that it will come out together with the Fit for 55 package, which is a huge package, and then really driving the whole of the EU for the next decades. How do you see that the forest strategy, fine-tuned, balanced views that we have just been discussing now can be safeguarded in the environment where it will be with this elephant in the room of the Fit for 55? And how can you make these links work? Do you have an answer to that?
That was an easy one, wasn't it?
It was, but that's why we invited you, Jessica.
Yeah, thank you. And of course, everyone is waiting for the Fit for 55 package. And what I could understand from yesterday, it has been postponed. and maybe that could be an indicator for that this is a complicated material. And I think, of course, there are different. It will affect the forest industry, as for example, the LULUCF will also be revised in this package. And I see that it is important for me and others who are friends of the forest to be very careful about what is the outcome of this, because of course we do have to change and revise this according to the new climate goals that was set by the parliament, and I think that this has to go hand in hand. But it's also important that this will not be that it will not be a worse product than it was from the beginning, and from a maybe forest perspective. So of course I will follow this very closely and see what effect it could have on the forest, for example the LULUCF.
Thanks, Jessica.
Well, thank you. So from the organizers' side, a very big thank you to all three of you, Marta, Jessica and Dan, for contributing here today. And I think there's quite many of us looking forward to read this revised forest strategy once it is published. So once again, thank you. Yes. So based on my personal experience, I know from numerous discussions that unfortunately forestry and forest management is not always perceived as perhaps modern and at the forefront of technology development. But I would say that nothing could be more wrong than that. Especially in the area of digitalization, a lot is happening today. And to learn more about digital solutions in modern forestry, we now will have the pleasure of listening to Maria Wetterstrand. Hello, Maria. Your microphone is off. Could you please turn it on?
Yes. Hello.
Hello, Maria. Welcome to the Cepinar. And I'll just explain to the participants that you are a board member of a Swedish research program by the name of Mistra Digital Forest. And you promised to share with us a couple of really neat digital solutions in forestry for today and tomorrow. So I leave the digital floor to you.
Thank you. And the pictures will be shown from your side. So precisely. I will be waiting for those. I think they are on their way now. Yes, great. Thank you so much. We talk a lot in the EU today about the green and digital twin transition, and the Mistra Digital Forest Research Program is focusing exactly on this, on digitalization of the forestry sector, and how this can also contribute to a significant leap regarding forest operations through digitalization, both from an economic and sustainability perspective, or a broad sustainability perspective, so to say, which includes all these three aspects. So one of the important things in this project is the forest facts, which is illustrated by the picture to the left, where we gather knowledge about the growing forest and how it is the variety of the forests, and through different types of laser scanning, and how this can contribute to long-term forest management planning. So we'll look a little bit into that in a second. So the vision of the project as a whole is to find a sort of digital solutions for a sustainable and efficient forest-based bioeconomy, and to enable this value chain, digital forestry value chain, so the digitalization of the whole value chain of the forest. So for that, we also look at the forestry operations, which is the picture in the middle, to find smart tools to develop the operations of the forests by digital solutions. It's automation in the machines and support of the planning of operations by different kinds of digital tools. I will show you a little bit of that as well. And the third part is the sustainability aspects, and how to get sustainable and valuable products from the forestry sector in an improved way in the future by improving the methods for sustainability evaluations and incorporate high resolution data in the sustainability assessments. So to use the digital tools for creating a more sustainable and also more economically viable forestry sector. We can change to the next picture. So we know already a lot, of course, about how our forests grow in Europe, and we've known that for hundreds of years. And not least, the forest owners know quite well about their own forests. But this is a tool now to develop that knowledge so that we can also increase the knowledge about the variability in the forest by laser scanning. So this shows a forest created in a computer based on laser data that has been captured from an aeroplane. And the research in this MR Digital Forest program is about how to extract the specific information of interest from a large data set about the forests. And this laser scanning is very valuable to do that. So the colors in the pictures, they indicate the height of the trees, but you can also use the same type of data set to examine many other parameters, such as the wood species for individual trees, the growth, or different indicators for biodiversity. And of course, the scanning from an airplane is not new as such. It is done in other countries than Sweden as well. We are now trying out methods to increase the resolution and also methods for how to use this so that it can be a valuable tool for the industry in a better way than today. We can also, the knowledge about forests are quite good, and we can also get a lot of information about average values, but through a more detailed high resolution scanning, we can get more knowledge about the variation in the forests, and that might improve the planning when you know better what you will deliver to the industrial facilities, for example, and the information flow will improve, and it might also improve sustainability measures. So this could potentially be very valuable information that can improve efficiency and sustainability measures. We can move on to the next picture. This is a vision of the future work in the forest when we have a high degree of automation. And the machines here, they are running without an operator physically connected to it. They are thus made more simple, small, and flexible because they don't need an actual human being sitting on them. And the operator who manages these virtually may have control over several machines going in parallel, and the workplace could then be more ergonomic, and the work could be done together with colleagues at a place a bit further away. And when a forest machine has been loaded with the raw materials, it will slowly take its route to the road where these logs are to be picked up. And that could be possible to automate to a large extent. And only if there are problems that occur along the way, or they need to find a new route or something, then you would need to have the operator take control. But otherwise, that could possibly actually be done automatically. So in this screen in the picture, the operator can see what trees are to be harvested and which are to be left behind. The amount of different qualities that remains for the order can be clearly seen, and you can see the different qualities that you can get out of these trees, if it's spruce or pine, or if it's suitable for pulpwood, or if it's birchwood, or what kind of qualities you can get out of it. And it would also increase then the knowledge base, which can be furthered to the industrial facilities that will use these logs in their production chain. But this increased automation, of course, it will happen in many steps, and this is an illustration that is quite far into the future. But at the same time, it's quite interesting because it tackles some of the challenges today. Loneliness, risks, land damage can be tackled by using these type of machines, which you can operate virtually from a distance. It can improve statistical knowledge and improve analysis, and also improve the planning connected to biodiversity, and possible also the protection of cultural and historical sites, for example, by keeping track of both, of course, exactly where you are, but also the demands and which actions has been taken. And you could connect this also to possibly an AI, which can help you with some decision making through the process. So even if it's far into the future, it's quite interesting, I think. And the next is a film. So let's have a look at that. Yes, so this is an animation which is more inspiration than an actual technology that is used today, but it's to sort of free our minds and realize that we may not be stuck in the technology of today. This is inspired by the movement of monkeys in tropical forests, and especially where the area or the forest to be harvested is on a steep hill, or if the ground is wet and normal forest machines might cause severe damage or have other problems, this could be beneficial. They are small and flexible units, and they could be automated, and maybe the machines could run by themselves. And yeah, it's just an animation from ideas. But who knows, with the speed of change that we see today, this or parts of it might be actually developed over the years to come. Let's move on to the last picture. This is about the sustainability tools. We are in this MISTRA Digital Forest program working on improving the sustainability assessment and LCAs for the forestry sector, so that you could have better tools to assess the sustainability aspects of forestry. Today, there is no generally accepted methods for measuring the impact on biodiversity within the life cycle assessments of the forestry, because there are some challenges connected to that. How do you handle the value chain perspective? What kind of biodiversity should be included? What should be the scale? Should it be very local or regional or global or whatever? So this is about developing a method for assessing the impact on biodiversity of forestry, so that we could have more simple methods to assess that. And the goal is to also take into account the future, to have a future-focused LCA and analysis to see how the sustainability results can be affected in the future by actions taken in the forests today, and also to include the whole value chain. And you can look at what products will actually be developed from the different parts of a tree and so on. So this could potentially be used to better assess the impact of forestry on biodiversity, and also to sort of prove where this is heading today. Possibly it might also be used to develop solutions connected to the demands in the EU taxonomy, for example. It's not anything we've been looking at, but I think that it's interesting to sort of imagine that this could be used, some of parts of this already today. So thanks. That was all from me. Did you have any final questions, Anna, or are you happy with the information?
And if I may just do one quick question with you before I let you go.
Yes, thank you.
You've now been a board member of this research program for a few years. So, I mean, what has it learned you? What is the main insight that it has given to you?
That the forestry sector is far more interesting than I thought before, and that there are so many different ways to develop it to become even better and more sustainable and more efficient also in the future.
Well, thank you so much. Thank you for sharing and thank you for participating here today. So
thank you for inviting me.
So bye-bye for you. And ladies and gentlemen, that has taken us to the end of this event. And as organizers, we do hope that you have found the discussions interesting. And like I asked to Maria, we also hope that you have gained one or two new more insights. We look forward to welcoming you back to another Cepinar, hopefully in collaboration with the Swedish forest industries soon in the future. Until then, stay safe and do take care. Thank you. Bye-bye.